Ever wondered how we went from a world of knights in shining armor and humble serfs to the bustling nations and sprawling cities we know today? It's a journey that spans centuries, filled with revolutions, brilliant ideas, and the relentless march of human ambition. Let's rewind the clock and explore this incredible transformation. Our story begins in the Middle Ages, a time defined by feudalism. Picture a pyramid of power. At the very top sat the king. Below him were the powerful lords and barons who controlled vast estates called manors, and at the bottom, the serfs bound to the land, working from sunrise to sunset in exchange for protection. Life was local. Your entire world might be the village you were born in. The manor was self-sufficient, producing its own food, clothes, and tools. Loyalty was not to a country called France or England, but to your local lord. The church was the unifying force, a spiritual kingdom that overshadowed all the earthly ones. It was a static, hierarchical world, built on obligation and land. But change was quietly brewing, and one of its biggest catalysts was the Black Death. This devastating plague swept across Europe in the mid-14th century, wiping out a massive portion of the population. It was a horrific tragedy, but it radically shook the foundations of feudalism. With so many workers gone, labor suddenly became scarce and valuable. For the first time, serfs had bargaining power. They could demand better wages or even leave their manor for a better offer. The rigid bonds of serfdom began to fray. This demographic collapse cracked the very structure that had held the medieval world together for centuries. As the old feudal order weakened, new centers of power and activity emerged, towns and cities. These weren't like the manors. They were hubs of trade, craftsmanship, and new ideas. Merchants and artisans formed guilds, powerful organizations that controlled production and quality. A new class of people, the bourgeoisie, gained wealth not from land, but from commerce and skill. They weren't lords or serfs, they were something new. Cities became magnets for those seeking opportunity, buzzing with a different kind of energy. This urban growth created a dynamic, money-based economy that stood in stark contrast to the land-based economy of the feudal manor. As cities grew and trade routes expanded, monarchs saw their chance. They began to consolidate their power, seeking to create centralized states. Instead of relying on a patchwork of loyalties from powerful, often rebellious nobles, kings started building their own armies and bureaucracies, funded by taxes on the growing urban economies. They standardized laws, created national currencies, and fostered a sense of shared identity. The idea of belonging to a nation, a large community of people with a common language, culture, and government, began to take shape. This was a monumental shift from loyalty to a local lord to loyalty to a king and a country. The Age of Nations was dawning. This shift was supercharged by the Renaissance, a cultural rebirth that looked back to the classical wisdom of Greece and Rome. It championed humanism, placing human potential and achievement at the center of the universe. This new way of thinking challenged the old, divinely ordained hierarchies. People started to see themselves not just as cogs in a feudal machine, but as individuals with the capacity for greatness. The invention of the printing press was a game changer, allowing these new ideas to spread like wildfire, breaking the church's monopoly on information and fueling literacy among the growing middle class. Then came the age of exploration. Driven by a thirst for wealth, glory, and new trade routes, European nations like Spain and Portugal set sail into the unknown. Discovering new continents and establishing global trade networks brought immense wealth back to Europe. This wealth flowed directly into the royal treasuries and the pockets of urban merchants, further strengthening the power of nation-states and their cities while making the old land-based aristocracy seem less and less relevant. Global trade created a global economy, and the cities at the heart of this network became the epicenters of power and finance. The final pieces of the puzzle fell into place with the political and industrial revolutions. Thinkers of the Enlightenment championed ideas like liberty, equality, and the rights of man. They argued that governments should serve the people, not the other way around. These radical ideas exploded into action with events like the American and French Revolutions, which overthrew old monarchies and established nations based on the principle of popular sovereignty. The very idea of the citizen replaced the subject. You were no longer just born into a role. You were an active participant in your nation's destiny. At the same time, the Industrial Revolution transformed cities on a scale never seen before. Factories sprang up, drawing millions from the countryside in search of work. Cities exploded in size, becoming the engines of modern industrial economies. This mass migration permanently severed the last ties to the rural, feudal past for vast numbers of people. Life was no longer dictated by the seasons and the harvest, but by the factory whistle and the clock. And so, here we are. The journey from a world of isolated manors to one of interconnected nations and megacities was a long and complex process. It was driven by disease, trade, new technologies, and revolutionary ideas. The rigid pyramid of feudalism was dismantled piece by piece, replaced by the dynamic, sprawling, and sometimes chaotic world we inhabit today. The knight and the serf gave way to the citizen and the urbanite. It is a powerful reminder that the world we see as normal is just one chapter in a long and ever-changing human story. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this journey through history interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into how our world came to be. See you in the next video.